As you move through your first meeting with a new client, you're trying to find out more and more useful information for yourself because this is what allows you to do a great job. But your aim in asking great questions is also to get the client dialed in to what they really want their money to be used for. Without that clear connection between the money and its purpose, advice becomes commoditized and low value. If you want to know how best to invest, go and buy a Vanguard Life Strategy Fund for 15 basis points. You don't need an advisor to tell you that. But if you want to live an amazing retirement, support your family, and spend your last penny on the last day of your life, then you're going to need some help. In this next section of the list of interesting questions, which I call the power questions, I've included some of the really great questions that I've come across over the years and love to ask. Why do I love to ask them? Because when used properly, they allow the client to remember what's important to them. The truth is, most clients do know what they want their life to look like, but in a busy world, they can sometimes forget. Your job is to ask them questions that let them remember the things they know are important to them, and then organize the client as best you can financially so they can stay focused on what's important. So let's take a look. The first three questions are from George Kinder, the father of the life planning movement. I know George personally, and I'm a big fan of his work. If you haven't been and done his Evoke Life Planning 5-day training course, I can't recommend it highly enough. In fact, if you're going to develop your listening skills, then I think this is one of the best courses to get yourself on. So here are George's three questions, which need to be asked in order as a series. The first question is, I want you to imagine that you're financially secure, that you have enough money to take care of your needs now and into the future. The question is, how would you live your life? What would you do with the money? Would you change anything? Let yourself go. Don't hold back your dreams. Describe a life that's complete, that's richly yours. In my experience, you might get some decent answers here, but it can also be more of a wish list. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's a fairly high-level question. The second question is, now imagine that you visit your doctor who tells you that you only have 5 or 10 years left to live. You won't ever feel sick, but you'll have no notice of the moment of your death. What will you do in the time you have remaining? Will you change your life, and how will you do it? And note that this question doesn't assume unlimited funds. It assumes you have your current financial resources. For me, this is the question that can elicit the person's real desires about how they want to be living their life. Although you're asking them what they'd do if they only had 5 years or so left to live, the answers they provide are really the blueprint for how they might choose to live their life right now. Let me stress, the client might not realize that as they answer, but you need to. Ask yourself this question. Or do this question with yourself and your partner and really go there. What would you do if you only had 5 years or so left to live? Would you work as hard? Would you spend more time with your family? What comes up for you? And as someone once said to me, how do you know you don't only have 5 years left to live? It's a good question. We all assume we're going to live forever, but we're not. I've role-played the Kinder questions a lot in my consulting work with advisors. I'll usually play the client and get the advisor to ask me the questions so they can get comfortable with them. My answer to George's second question was the same every time. If I only had 5 years or so left to live, I'd spend every winter skiing in the Alps. I reckon I'd said that 100 times in my various role-play responses. I remember catching the train home from a client I'd been working with in Bournemouth, and it was like a bolt from the blue. I thought to myself, I need to go and do that now, not in the future. And in late 2014 and early 2015, my wife and I got our shit together and arranged a 6-week ski trip to Saas-Fee in Switzerland. In June of 2015, we sold everything, rented out our home in London and went travelling for 15 months while still running FP Advance. It was an amazing life experience and taught us so much. As part of that, we did a 3.5-month ski season in Switzerland, and I went back in September of the same year and did a 13-week ski instructor's course too. All of that off the back of George's second question. who says this shit doesn't work. Okay, the third question is, finally, imagine that your doctor shocks you with the news that you only have 24 hours to live. Ask yourself, who did you not get to be? What did you not get to do? What did you miss? This question is a nice way of asking, what regrets might you have if this was it? But it works better than asking people about their regrets because people tend to fib. If you ask me, do I have any regrets? I'll probably say no. But if you ask me George Kinder's question and I give it some thought, I can come up with some things that I'm still yet to finish or do. So it's a great final question. What comes out of these three questions, if you ask them with skill, is that clients are able to come up with a list of what really matters to them. Mostly, it's bog standard stuff like spending more time with the family or taking their kids on some adventures while they're still young enough to want to go. The point is, it doesn't matter what comes up for each individual client. Your job is to help them uncover it and then arrange their financials so they can get back to doing what's important for them in their lives. That's financial planning done right in a nutshell. Here's the thing. You need to get comfortable with these questions. So the first step is doing these questions properly for yourself and your family. Once you've done that, practice asking these questions with your spouse or life partner, or your business partners at work. Ask them in the pub with friends or at a dinner party if the conversation moves toward the things that are important for people. But the best way to get comfortable is to go and do some proper training with the Kinder Institute. I've got the details on screen for you now. What you'll learn is a much deeper skill set. It's not just about the three questions. They're simply the jumping off point. Okay, let's talk about how different advisors use the Kinder questions in practice. I'm a fan of just asking them cold in the first meeting. I like the fact that clients will have to really dig in to answer them. But by this stage of my meeting, they've been warmed up with a load of other interesting questions, so they're in the groove. In my experience, 8 out of 10 clients will answer these questions if you just ask them and then shut up. You need to be comfortable leaving a ton of space for the client. They're tough questions that require real thought, otherwise they're no good. Unless you go there and really imagine yourself in each situation, nothing much comes up. So leave the client loads of space to ponder before they answer. That's one way. Other advisors tell me that when they get to this part of the meeting, they give a pen and paper to each member of a couple and ask one question at a time and ask the couple to write down their answers separately. Then they ask one person to read back their answers. Usually, the non-dominant member of the couple is asked to go first. Then the other person reads their answers and there's some discussion. It can be a really good way to get some quality answers and open up a really interesting follow-up discussion. But it can also get emotional, so you need to be okay with that and have the skills to manage it well. Hence my recommendation to get yourself on George's course. The third way I've heard advisors using these questions deals with the 2 out of 10 clients who just can't answer them cold. If you ask the question and someone pauses for a long time before answering, that's normal. But occasionally, after a long pause, someone might say, I can't really answer that, or I'd need more time to give you a decent answer. In both cases, you might set the questions as homework and ask the client to send you their answers once they've had some time to reflect on them properly. I'm okay with that if the client tells me they need that. However, I'm not a fan of making that my default process. I want to make some impact at that first meeting, and asking these questions is one way to do that. If I always revert to setting them for homework, it doesn't have the same impact in my view. All right, the next power question comes from Dan Sullivan. His famous question is, if we were sitting here in 3 years' time and looking back on the last 3 years, what would have to have happened both personally and professionally for you to feel happy with your progress? Specifically, what dangers would you like to eliminate? What opportunities would you like to capture? And what strengths would you like to maximize? It's asked in 2 parts. The first part of the question is asked straight out, and the client tells you what would have to have happened for them personally and professionally for them to feel happy with their progress. That's pretty easy. The second part of Dan's question requires a bit more help for the client. You'll need to be going through each part of this question separately. So firstly, what dangers would you like to eliminate? You then help the client identify any dangers or risks in their situation. I'm thinking it might be what happens if they die or get disabled type stuff that we're probably pretty good at helping them uncover. But it might also be dangers or risks in their career, like the possibility of redundancy or forced early retirement. Or maybe their relationship is under pressure, which might have financial consequences if it ends. You're looking for any dangers that you or the client can think of at this stage and just creating a list of possibilities. The second part asks, what opportunities would you like to capture? And this is looking at anything cool, fun, or interesting the client wants to do. It might be big things like writing a book, or taking a bucket list holiday, or paying for their children to attend a great school or university. Anything you or they can think of that feels like an opportunity. Once again, just create a list of possibilities. The third part of the question is a little trickier, but really awesome if you can help the client see the value. It asks, what strengths would you like to maximize? Now, if you've read any Dan Sullivan, you'll know that he's hot on working to your unique ability. He's of the view that if you work on your weaknesses, you just end up with better weaknesses. So he teaches people to focus on their unique ability and to hire support around them to deal with the things they're weak at. I like the philosophy. And that's what you're trying to get the client to think about with this question. What are they good at? What's their unique ability, and how do you help them to spend more time in a place where they're using that unique ability? Sometimes as a financial planner, you can reorganize a client's financial resources in a way that allows them to get rid of some of the distractions in their life so they can spend more time on the things they're good at and that matter to them. With each of these questions, in the second part of the larger Dan Sullivan question, you create a list of the dangers, opportunities, and strengths, and pick the most important one from each list as judged by the client, and start making plans on how to take some action to resolve each one or to move it forward. This question and this process might be something you use every year with your clients at review time, the thinking being that there'll always be the next things to work on. Dan Sullivan calls his question, and that's the total question asked in the two sections, the R factor question, R standing for relationship. He believes that if a client answers this question, they're happy to be engaging in a relationship with you. Conversely, he also believes that if they won't answer this question, they're not prepared to enter a relationship with you and you can simply terminate the meeting. I'm in that camp too. If the client doesn't want to answer these types of questions, I'm happy to just walk away. I want to work with people that are open and happy to share what's important to them so I can help. But let me make a distinction between the Kinder questions and the Dan Sullivan question. The Kinder questions are a bit harder to answer, so if someone struggles a bit there, I'm happy to try and accommodate them. With the Dan Sullivan question, I believe that anyone can give me a few things they'd like to have achieved in the next 3 years, personally and professionally. So I'm looking for an answer. Does that make sense? My very final question, after we've asked any follow-ups and had the discussions that naturally flow from these interesting questions, is this. After you leave today, is there any other question that you'll wish I'd asked you? Basically, you're asking, is there anything else you should know about the client before they leave? Often at this stage, the client might laugh nervously and say something about the fact you seem to have asked them everything under the sun. That's fine. It means they've noticed how thorough you've been, and that'll be a differentiating factor compared to most other advisors who are just going to skim the surface. Or they'll tell you something else that they really want you to know. It's a perfect finishing question before you change gears and start giving them some value.